moved across the country with only the essentials. Everything else went into a truck.
They said that they would move our stuff. It should be there by the time we arrive, which was the 24th of April.
Months later, Contact 6 stepped in. Why one consumer attorney says interstate movers have little incentive to protect your property.
The industry is not heavily regulated by the state or federal government, so there's not a lot of oversight.
Plus, rats in a storage unit.
It's not fair to the customers. This stuff have to be repurchased.
The reason one woman won't get a refund for any of her damaged property. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I am here with Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
And we once again are joined by Contact 6's Jenna Sachs. Welcome back, Jenna.
Thank you.
We're recording this episode on Wednesday, October 23rd, and today we're going to talk about protecting your prized possessions. We all have deep attachments to our stuff. It's why we pay hundreds of dollars a month to keep things in self-storage or thousands of dollars to move them from one home to the next. Recently, Contact 6 reported on two women who had trouble keeping their belongings safe. One says her items were damaged, the others went missing, and both discovered there were little or no protections in place to help them when things went wrong. We'll dive into those stories when we come right back. Welcome back to Open Record. Moving across the country, boy, it can't ever be stressful. I'm moving across
It's stressful
the city.
moving
It's
across
stressful.
the street,
across
I feel
the
like.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
But across the country, even when things go right, it's stressful, right?
Right.
But as for one family moving from Washington State to Mequon, it was an especially long and painful experience. Tell us about what happened to the Tucker family.
Right. So Jennifer Tucker grew up in the area, but she was living in Washington State with her two daughters, decided to move back to Mequon. She was moving in with her mother. Her mother is widowed, and she's a single mom, and her mom is getting older, and she thought this will be great for both of us if we're all in the same house. So around April 15th, a moving truck picked up her belongings in Washington State. They loaded everything on. They didn't get a ton of notice that the moving truck was coming, about 24 hours, so it was a very chaotic time getting everything ready, getting everything on the truck. And they were told your truck will arrive typically 1 to 2 weeks after your items are loaded up. And she thought, well, that's great. We're getting to Mequon like April 24th, like a week and a half from now. That should be just fine. So they packed, just their necessary items, toothbrushes,
I'm
clothes,
already anxious
shoes.
of a couple of weeks away from all my
Yeah.
stuff, not seeing it. That already
Right.
makes me nervous.
Well, they thought they had enough things packed to get them through those few weeks. But the problem is they got to Mequon and the wait continued. The weeks go by, and they expected there might be some delays. Bad weather can delay things a little bit, but they got into the summer. They needed summer clothes. June rolls around, and a moving truck does pull up. They're so excited. They're ready to go. The kids are outside, and it's the wrong items.
It's not their stuff?
I can't
It's
even
not
imagine.
their stuff.
Oh,
they said there
no.
were two bicycles on it. They said, we've got your bikes. They had two bicycles. It was someone else's
not
two
their
bicycles.
bikes.
So they had
So
to send
none
that
of
truck.
this was their stuff?
None of that stuff
Oh,
was
wow.
there. So they were heartbroken. She's got two kids who are like elementary school aged.
Yeah.
Their faces fell. They were so disappointed. They thought they were getting their blankies back that they had packed
Yes.
away.
Which also makes you wonder, then there's this truck with somebody else's stuff.
Like, so
Who's
if
got
this is
my
here,
stuff?
where is it?
Well, right. I mean, someone else had those items that were unaccounted for and had gone to the wrong place too. So after months of this, school starts in September. They finally decided to reach out to Contact 6. They said it's almost 5 months now, and we would like our stuff back. We reached out to them, the movers, and they did get their items 3 days later, but it was a heck of a process getting there.
So they okay. So they hired this
There's so
moving
many things I wanna say.
yeah,
There's
right.
so
So
many
they
things.
hired a moving company, but that's not exactly who ended up moving their stuff.
So Jennifer's mom, Linda, is the one who booked the moving truck. And she went online and she Googled, interstate movers. And what she discovered is that a lot of companies come up, but they're not moving companies, they're brokerage operations, a distinction she didn't understand at the time. And a brokerage operation basically takes your contract and then assigns it to a subcontractor. So they're giving it to another company. In this case, it was called Green Pelican. And Linda
A little
didn't...
bit like I'm in trying to make an analogy. It's like
Yeah.
booking a hotel, right? You're using like hotels.com or something.
Yes,
or what, I don't mean to
right.
pick out, but you're using someone who books it, but you're not really booking with the hotel. In this case, you're not booking with the moving companies. This is just a booker online.
Right. She thought she was booking a truck with Elite Van Lines. And if you look them up on the BBB, they don't have a great rating, but it's not terrible. They have a B- rating. They had never heard of Green Pelican until they showed up. And Green Pelican does not do so well when you look into the number of complaints out there about it. So they didn't vet this one company. They looked at the other. They admit they could have done more research during the process, but they learned, a brokerage operation isn't the same thing as a moving company.
One of the first things that stood out to me early in your story here, though, is when you said they got less than 24 hours notice that a truck was coming. I mean, having been through a move before, you're scheduling out everything day by day. It's regimented. I have to have the boxes packed by this day. I've got when do I actually take the plates out of the cabinets and put them away, and when what stuff do we need to keep out just to get through for a few days or a week. But suddenly the truck's coming tomorrow, get ready. That's stressful.
Right. I think for the pickup day, they were given an approximate date. We'll try to pick it up within this time frame. But there's a lot of vague language in these contracts.
I guess what I'm wondering is that a red
discovered.
flag? When you're getting these sort of vagaries, should that be maybe a red flag? Or is that just how this works with this kind of
Sure, it
business?
can be. I mean, I think there are a lot of red flags, but there's also, as we mentioned earlier, not a lot of protections in place for the consumer. But think about where you are when you're moving, right? You're stressed. You're on a timeline.
Yeah.
You need to get things done in the time you expect. And if they say the truck is coming in 24 hours, you're like, I'm going to be on that truck because I need to be at this location at this date. So you just want to move it along. And that's how some of these issues can arise when people are already in a high pressure situation and they're hearing, hey, you have to pay us more. This is more stuff than we anticipated or estimated for, which is something that comes up. Or, you can't really guarantee your date of delivery. It'll arrive when it arrives.
I also wonder if this is when you're looking at in the middle of a move, costs are a big thing because the cost of everything is a big part of the calculations you're doing. Can we afford this move? Can we make this happen? Is there something? Are these discount type movers, or do we know if was price what made this attractive versus going, or did she just not know she wasn't booking directly with the company that was moving them?
Well, Linda didn't understand what a brokerage operation was. She said she did get multiple estimates, and they were all similar. She didn't go with the least expensive one. She went with the person she liked most on the phone. But all of these companies will say we're inexpensive, we're effective, we're efficient. But if you looked at Elite Van Line's website, it does clearly state that it's a brokerage operation. But then when things start to go wrong, your initial contact at that company isn't the person you're dealing with. The person you liked, who you made the booking through, isn't the person who's helping you track down your belongings.
Right. So then when their stuff isn't coming, and you're like, who do I even call? Because then it gets lost in like, well, it's not the person I first called. So now is there a contact with Green Pelican? So, okay, so their stuff comes from a truck and none of it's theirs.
Right.
And then they get it a couple days later.
That was after reaching out to you,
Yeah,
right?
They get
yeah.
it months later.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
So the truck pulled up in June. They reached out to us in September, and then all of their correct belongings
They're
arrived
so
3
patient.
days later.
I just sometimes the people who
yeah.
reach out to Contact 6, you think maybe they've jumped the gun a little bit.
Right.
It sounds like they were extra patient before they actually said we've got to go to the media.
Right. I mean, I've seen people, I hate to say it, in worse situations. We did a story a few years ago about a family that didn't have beds, it didn't have any furniture, and they were sleeping on, the floor in sleeping bags, on mattresses on the floor. At least Geneva's mother had some
Stuff,
furniture
right?
in her
That's
house.
what I
They
keep
could
thinking.
sleep on
Yeah.
couches. They had things that they could make do with, but all of their items hadn't arrived yet.
So I know that, Green Pelican pulls up with their stuff eventually. And they're just like, we just have this job and here we are, right? Like they didn't have any answers, did they?
Well, so Green Pelican is they're the ones who arrived and picked up their stuff in Washington State. But the people who arrived with their correct belongings were actually subcontractors of Green Pelican.
Oh my gosh.
So subcontractors of subcontractors. And they ended up waiving the Tuckers' final payment of $950, saying, we understand you've been through a lot. But Green Pelican, if you look them up, the BBB has one of those no ratings listed for the company. And they said it's because they couldn't verify their address. Mail was returned. And it does have a decent website for Green Pelican. It says they're based in California. But if you look on a website for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is something I assume most people are not doing.
I know they regulate all interstate trucking, right?
They do.
So, yeah.
Yes. So they regulate interstate movers as well. And they had an update posted on August 30th saying Green Pelican is not authorized to transport or arrange the transport of household goods. So that sounds like they're not able to do interstate moves after August 30th. So maybe that's the reason a subcontractor arrived, or maybe they just didn't want to see the Tuckers because of how bad this experience had been. We don't really know. But Green Pelican did have 15 complaints since 2023 with the FMCSA, so perhaps that's one reason. I asked the agency why this company is no longer authorized to transport items, and they did not respond to me. So that's, I'm trying to read between the lines. They have a history of complaints. Maybe that's part of it.
Did the Tuckers have insurance on their stuff? Is that part of the contract?
That is a good thing to bring up. So in their contract, there are a few things that they didn't understand. Some of them we've already talked about. The first is there's no guaranteed date of delivery. It says all dates are estimates and not guaranteed. The contract also says Linda is not eligible for a refund of her down payment, which she thought was kind of crazy in retrospect. She was saying, you can take all my stuff and never give it back, and I still don't get my down payment back, but that's what the contract says. And lastly, what you bring up, Sarah, it says insurance on their items is just 60 cents per pound per item, which is actually not a lot of money. We spoke with a consumer attorney who said that's pretty much the standard in the industry. It's all they're required to provide by the government. But I mean, maybe that would have been worth a good amount in the 1970s, but not today.
That's, and I only know this term because I did a story years ago. You remember the Moving Menace? We've probably talked about it here on the podcast before, but it was a problem moving company where the owner was actually a career criminal. And they were not only doing damage to people's property, but holding people's property hostage and saying, if you don't pay us more than we said at the beginning, we're never giving it back. And that insurance you're talking about is sort of a standard, right, in the industry.
Right.
It's called released value. But that per pound thing is what makes it so almost worthless. When you think about a really valuable heirloom you might have,
right.
It might not weigh very much, but it might be worth a lot of money.
Right.
Maybe a vase, a family vase or something. 60 cents a pound, you might get a few dollars for something that could be worth hundreds.
Right. And the consumer attorney we spoke with, Robert Murphy, he basically said this is little incentive for movers to try to protect your property when they know they're only going to have to reimburse you for 60 cents per pound per item. And he said there are issues in this industry without a lot of regulation. There's not heavy regulation by either the state or federal government. So that means there's just not a lot of oversight when things go wrong. And often these contracts are written in a vague way to favor the mover. And states, they don't have robust laws about these movers, including here in Wisconsin. And, consumers often don't have the budget to fight back. Maybe they hired someone because it was a good deal to begin with, which means they may not have a lot of money to get a lawyer to fight a case that may ultimately not be a winning one.
Now, that 60 cents per pound is sort of the automatic coverage you get from almost any moving company, but can you get more robust insurance if you choose to pay for it in a situation like this?
Yes, you can. So you can opt for a different insurance policy. You may have some coverage already, so it's good to ask your insurance company if you do have more. But yes, that's a good thing to try to do. You should also make sure you're researching the companies in advance. That's another tip. Make sure you're doing really thorough research. And the consumer attorney I spoke with said, not all brokerage operations are bad, but if you go with a national carrier who has name recognition that they want to protect, that might be a better way to go. And if you have truly, valuable items, he says it might be worth your time and money to rent a van,
keep it with
load
you,
up
right?
your car,
Yeah.
keep it there, drive through the night. Don't even park at a hotel and leave it in the lot. Just drive through the night, keep
do
those
your best,
especially those emotional items. Her family, those daughters really missed, their safety blankets at night.
Yeah.
I do want to know, did Green Pelican or Elite Van Lines talk to you for this story? Did they have anything to say about all of this?
They did not provide anything officially on the record. There were some questions back and forth with Elite Van Lines, and they did follow up with the Tuckers directly, and I know there was some discussion about reimbursing them for lost items, which is something we haven't mentioned yet. They did have some lost items as well. So Geneva Tucker is a hairstylist. A lot of her hairstyling tools were missing, along with like a DeWalt tool kit and some rugs.
Yeah, that can get expensive, all that. Yeah.
It can. And, the consumer attorney was saying, we don't know what happened to these items. They could have gotten mixed up with someone else's stuff, or he said maybe they were stolen. These are businesses that are offering on like a shoestring. They have like a shoestring budget to begin with, and maybe they're don't have a lot of security in place at these places where they're storing the stuff. A lot of people think you just put your items on a truck and they're going to stay there. But they're actually often combined with other people's things.
They're moved around. It's not like, it's
Which
not
is
like
how
they go
end
there
up
and
getting
stay
mixed
there.
up. And
Right. And, the higher end carriers will put up like mesh walls and barriers between people's belongings so they don't get mixed up so much. But the Tuckers were missing some things, and they got some things that weren't theirs as well. So they got a TV that wasn't theirs.
I just
some
feel like what a
rugs,
mess, man.
fishing poles.
I hope the Tuckers are doing okay now. I'm glad they got some help by calling Contact 6. But they're not the only ones who've lost something and certainly had a bad experience with their own belongings. From a moving truck to a storage locker, coming up, a woman whose belongings were chewed up by rats. She's not getting a refund for her storage facility. We'll explain why when we come right back.
We are back on Open Record. So we're talking about Sinatra Walker. And she, like a lot of us in moving life, have needed a storage locker to hold our stuff. She needed it for just a few weeks. But when she came back to get all her stuff, she found some of the stuff had been damaged by rats. And that is like one of my ultimate fears if I ever get a storage unit. So how bad was it?
Well, it was pretty bad. She sent us a video of a water cooler, with the big jug on it, and the rats had chewed through the cords,
Those
so
cords-
water was leaking
Yeah.
out the
That
back.
video and the pictures, I'm like,
The
Yeah, that had to
refrigerator
be thrown
lines.
out.
There
There were cords up the back of her refrigerator that the rats chewed through.
hold on, there's a spider. I'm sorry.
There's a spider?
I'm sorry. That was coming down. Sorry.
Was it right over
Little
Brian's
Miss
head?
Muffet.
coming down like this.
Yeah.
I
I didn't
want
see
it
it at
to
all
land.
either.
I was
Thank
looking
you.
around
Thank
being
you for
like, is there a
saving me.
bird in here?
Sorry.
Sarah
it's like a-
saved me.
That was really distracting.
From a
I
spider.
apologize.
Okay. It's Halloween.
I said, ooh, spooky.
Right before Halloween. Spider coming to hang out here.
We planted
on
it. Okay.
Open
Well,
record. Anyway.
So her refrigerator was broken. The water and ice dispensers didn't work. They also chewed through the bottom of her sofa, her ottoman. She had to throw out a bunch of clothes that had, rat feces on them. And she had plastic dishes and plates and things that had been chewed up as well.
So I'm watching your story on this, and it was in my mind the whole time. I was waiting to find out, did she have insurance? And then you said it. I don't know if you heard me. I was in my office watching the story, and when you said she didn't have insurance, I went, oh, yeah.
So this Sinatra had rented a unit through this facility before for a longer period of time. So she thought, I have experience with this place. It'll be fine. This is just for a few weeks. She was waiting for an apartment to become available. She thought it would be okay for just a few weeks, and it wasn't.
And again, you're watching costs. It already costs something to rent the
Right.
storage locker. You're thinking about these other things. Can I really afford the extra cost? But in this case, it cost her.
It did. So when you sign the documents for a storage locker, you often are offered insurance, right? So some places require you take it. It seems like this place did not. It's not that expensive. You can get it for $10 or less a month, or you can opt for more coverage, but she didn't take the insurance. And she even signed a document saying she understood the property was being signed at her sole risk, and she understands the owner is not responsible for any damage or losses involving her property. And that is the industry standard and legal. These storage operators are not held accountable for damage that takes place in these lockers.
Is there anything else in those contracts similar to that are pretty standard on storage contracts, or is it mainly the, hey, you are doing this at your own risk? And
in terms of what had happened to Sinatra, that's the main point. There are other things you should know about the contracts. Rent is typically something that can go up at the end of your contract, which is a monthly contract. Pretty typical to get a month-to-month contract that automatically renews, and maybe you set it on auto pay or something like that. But the storage operator has the right to raise your rent at the end of that contract. Some do it 3 times a year. And that's something we hear about often at Contact 6 as well. That wasn't Sinatra's case. Hers mostly had to do with that damage. If something were very negligent, she could try to find a lawyer to fight a case like this, but it might not be worth it.
That was going to be my question. Is I know you're not a lawyer. That's why you interview lawyers for your
Right.
stories. But is there sort of any limit to the fact that this is, hey, we are not responsible for anything? Is there any, like, if they leave the doors open and say, come on in and take these things, at some point
You
there
could
would be,
try
right?
hiring a lawyer for a case like that, but when we're talking about, a refrigerator, water cooler, dishes, it's going to cost more to hire a lawyer, or you could try small claims court or something like that. But it's an uphill battle considering these contracts are kind of written to protect.
now so she used Life Storage, right?
Yes.
So do they have to then, if there's been that rodent damage, do they have to tell all the other storage tenants, people that
You
are
think
renting.
the sooner you know, the better to get in there and
Yeah.
Check
get
your stuff.
Yeah, we reached out to Life Storage for the story. They're owned by a company called Extra Storage. And they said, when we found out about this incident, we did increase our pest control efforts. And they say they notify directly impacted customers. So like someone next door in the unit directly next to it. It doesn't sound like they notify everybody in the entire building, but they're saying if we find, for example, someone had food or other perishables in their item, rats got in, and around that area, we would tell people.
Maybe it's just me. Seems like an email to all the people who have a place. Hey, you might want to come check your stuff.
quick blast.
We had some, it just seems
Yeah.
like it wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe they don't do that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do wonder this. So that's got to be. I would think rodents are one of the top issues you find in places like this, right? Or what are some other issues that people run into when it comes to problems with their stuff at a storage locker?
What we hear about most often at Contact 6, one has to do with damage. That could be, animal damage, vermin. It could be a burst pipe. It could be flooding, warping. There's a lot of moisture sometimes in these units. We hear often about increases in rent that people didn't expect. Maybe they think it's unreasonable, but there is no cap in Wisconsin for how much a storage operator can raise your rent when your contract expires every month. And we also hear sometimes about items being auctioned off. So what happens when you sign a contract for a storage unit, you're actually giving the operator a lien on your property. So if your payments go unpaid, they can start that process of evicting you and auctioning off your items.
That's where shows like Storage Wars come in, right?
Yeah.
They're doing
Sure.
basically
Right.
that same thing. They're auctioning
Right.
off people's stuff that's been left behind. Yeah.
Right. And it can take as little as 45 days for that process to be carried out. And the money afterward first goes to the storage operator to pay whatever you may owe them, at costs associated with the auction, unpaid rent. And then they're supposed to find you and give the rest to you. But maybe contact information is an issue. Maybe they didn't have updated information. You moved or you got a new telephone number and you didn't realize that your payments had gone unpaid. The contract says that if they can't reach you, they tried, you didn't pay your rent, they can start the auction process.
One thing I did, so you also talked to Mequon Storage?
Yes.
Right? So one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. I didn't really think about that, was he talked about putting down a pallet
Oh yeah, he did.
first,
Keep your things elevated.
keep your things a
Sure,
little
yeah.
elevated so that if there is a little bit of water, your stuff isn't just sitting in it.
Yeah, that was one thing he said. He said the floors can have moisture. They usually recommend people elevating off the floor. You can get air controlled, temperature controlled units for more money. But he said, make sure you do your research. We went to Mequon Storage because they have zero complaints to the BBB and they've been around for a while. So we thought that was a good indication. And it is really a top of the line facility. But he said, ask, about security cameras, visit the property. If safety is a concern, make sure there's good lighting. Find out when hours are, if you need to access it at all hours of the day. And, just make sure you're really doing your homework and understanding that you want to have insurance because that storage operator is not going to cover your losses.
When he said just you kind of take a look at
That's what I'm
what
saying,
does the
yeah,
place
take a
look
look,
like in
yes.
that video, you could see
It
is
nice,
certainly
really
probably a little
clean.
higher end. I'm guessing they
Yeah.
cost more,
Yeah.
but you could tell it was very clean
Yeah.
and new. And you look at it and you go, okay, this doesn't look like the kind of place where I'm going to have a rat problem. You might go somewhere else, and I'm not saying Life Storage was that kind of place, but you might see. I see some holes up here, some gaps. I have concerns.
Right.
That's something maybe to take into consideration.
That was something Sinatra said later. She said later when I went through the building, I realized I did see some trash cans that hadn't been emptied and things like that I would have paid more attention to. She's like, in the future, I think I'll make cleanliness a higher priority. We were not able to get into that facility ourselves.
Did
to
you reach out
verify.
to Life Storage?
Yeah, Life Storage sent us a statement about
Yeah.
this, basically saying, we tell people to get insurance. We recommend getting insurance. We notify impacted people. We do increase our pest control efforts when this kind of thing happens. And then they said, people need to remember also, don't keep any perishables in your unit. There was some back and forth between them and Sinatra because the first time she wrote to us, she said they got through a lot of my items and she said seasonings on there on her form. When I asked her about that, she said, no, the seasoning jars. She had emptied them, cleaned them, but much like her plastic plates, she's saying the animals, maybe they still smelled something on them and they had gotten through her seasoning jars. So Life Storage thought that she had kept seasonings in there. We couldn't get to the bottom of it, but Sinatra was adamant, no, I've had storage units before. Why would I want to keep perishable food in my unit? I wouldn't do that.
Well, she's just one of many, many people who have written to Contact 6 this year asking for help. We are going to talk with Jenna when we come back about other cases they've been handling, a little bit more about the history of Contact 6 when we come right back after this. We are back on Open Record. Contact 6, of course, loves helping people save money. Jenna, exactly how much money do viewers say we've saved them this year, 2024?
So I emailed our associate producer, Annette, yesterday. So our number is $417,989. So
That's real money.
that's quite a bit.
Real money.
And we have resolved 190 cases this
awesome.
year. So
and I love that they range from $20 to
Some $0
to 40,000 plus. I mean, there's
Right.
there's a range, and so I know we talk about it a lot, but it's not always like that the consumer wants. Oh, I this $20 is so important to me.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to be heard, and they want someone to be an advocate for them.
Right. And I mean, sometimes it involves no money. The way we determine the amount of money is whatever the consumer tells us they feel like they saved. And we'll look at the timeline and see if it adds up, after we reached out to the business. If the issue was resolved before we reached out to the business or we hadn't processed the complaint yet, we won't take down that number. But if the consumer says, no, you made a difference, you're the reason this happened, and here's the value of the refrigerator I had replaced, or here's the refund check amount that I received, that's how we record that number. And often it's just a couple $100.
I still feel like when you talk about those big numbers, you should have a little tablet you can turn around to the viewer and then they can press 15, 20, or 25%.
Stop. Yeah,
Thank you
right.
for your service. It's journalism, we can't do that, but it just still seems like that'd be kind of nice. What are especially as we're in the fall season right now, I imagine there must be seasonal complaints, things that you get like different times of the year. We get more of these kinds of complaints. As we're into fall and heading toward winter, what are the kinds of trends you see and what do you expect to see?
Well, the trends aren't as distinct as they used to be. I will say in fall, we tend to see some contractor complaints because projects that were supposed to happen in the summer maybe got delayed to the fall, haven't happened yet. Another big thing we see is obviously after Christmas, online purchases, people bought items and the tablet never worked or it didn't arrive in time for Christmas, and when it arrived it was 5 sizes too small. There's a lot of things that come like that, but other complaints we get year round, things to do with furniture delivery, cell phones, internet. There's a whole list. Billing issues, medical billing, although those have kind of gone down recently with the No Surprises Act. So that's gone down a little bit.
I always like when Jenna comes up and we're talking about different, topics or complaints that are coming in, and she'll say, well, we're coming up on bad contractor season.
Yeah.
That's why I wondered, are there certain things I know we're going to start getting these flooding in, but you're saying really you get a lot of stuff that's year round.
We do. I mean, but there are certain times where things start to peak. But people are having issues year round, and we're here. And there's also times where people have more time to file complaints. So we might see, if there was a break in school or people were off work, they might file a complaint during that time too.
I wonder, so you said you've resolved 190 cases, which is remarkable considering it's a staff of 2. And you've resolved all of these issues for people. The way you said that says everything about this. We should have Annette in here to come in and she could, do therapy for her. But on top of that, you get a lot of other complaints that you're helping people. Maybe you're not resolving their issue, but you're giving them resources, you're giving them direction, things like that.
Right.
Have you seen a trend in just the number of contacts you're receiving from year to year? I mean, you've been now, I talk about the history of Contact 6, you've been now the Contact 6 reporter for 8 years? Something like that, 8, 9? Something like that?
That sounds right.
And so over that time, have you seen trends in the number of calls you're getting, the types of calls you're getting, that sort of thing?
Well, during those 8 years, we've definitely seen more complaints and more resolutions. During that time, I'm proud that we've had some record-breaking years the last couple of years, and not just by a little bit, by a lot. I think last year we saved like $670,000 for our viewers, which was a huge year. But in terms of the people who are reaching out, I think, I don't know if I'm seeing any trends in terms of more or less. I don't know.
I think now, 2024, we have several different ways for people to file complaints.
Sure.
It used to be before the digital era, it was, hey, print out this form, fill it out, mail it back to FOX6. Now it's as simple as clicking on the website. The form is there. It lists.
We show QR codes on
there.
there.
And it lists cases that we don't take, what you need when you do file this complaint, so that there should hardly be any questions as to okay, what else do I need before I send this off to Contact 6?
One thing that has been going a lot more smoothly over the last 6 years or so since Annette got involved, we used to have a part-time case manager, and now we have Annette working full-time handling cases, which allows for more follow-up and more back and forth between the consumer. It used to be, we would send the complaint along, the business would respond, and, maybe it was resolved, but we didn't know. Annette now follows up and says, hey, did that case ever get resolved? And there's just more interaction than there used to be, which I think is a good thing.
I want to talk about that process a little bit, because it used to be, people would call in on a tip line, and you had to take the call and take their information and that sort of thing. Now you've got the form online. People fill out the form. There are certain cases you don't take, certain ones you do. But once they fill out that form, sort of what happens? Give us the sort of what's happening on the back end, because I know most of these never end up in a news story that ends up on TV. Some do. Obviously, we talked to Sinatra about her issue, and that's, but most of these cases don't. So what's the process like once someone sends that form in?
Right. I think what makes Contact 6 unique from pretty much all other consumer segments is that we have this whole thing going on behind the scenes, this whole off-air resolution process. So you submit the form, Annette reviews it, and if there's additional documentation that she needs, she might email you back and say, hey, do you have a receipt for that? Do you have an estimate for the damage to your car if there was an issue with the vehicle? She will follow up. Do you have pictures? So on. And then once we have that information, if it's a pretty straightforward case and it meets her criteria, she will forward your complaint form, typically word for word, unless we want to work with someone on whether they're asking for something that's reasonable or not. She'll forward that to the business and ask them to review it and respond. And when the business does, we'll forward that response to the viewer. And the whole point of it is to reestablish that communication that may have broken down. It's pretty easy nowadays to just get lost in that customer service line, especially when you're not talking to real people, or you have a case that's a little bit complicated and the customer service rep just can't with you that day. They just can't figure it out. They're not trained well enough, or it's too complicated. So this kind of puts you at the top of the pile, because we have contacts at these places who deal with us on a monthly basis, some of them. There's definitely businesses in town that are very familiar with that process. So it's all about sending that form to the business, getting their response, sending it to the viewer, and then saying, hey, can you guys come to a resolution here?
That's what I thought was maybe one of the more interesting parts is you take the consumer complaint, you present it to the business, that makes sense. But you're also taking the business's response and presenting that back to the consumer.
Right.
And sometimes, I don't know if people realize that you're essentially acting as somewhat of a mediator in the situation. While you advocate for consumers, it is not a blanket advocacy where you say, no matter what the consumer said, it must be right. And the business must be wrong. You don't make the assumption the business is wrong. You're saying, here's what they're saying. Help me understand what's really going on and what can be done to resolve this.
Right. And basically, we do say in our letter to the businesses, we understand that there's room for interpretation here. You may have a different version of what happened. Tell us what that is. And we don't want businesses to resolve cases just to resolve them, right? If they feel like it's not fair, they should tell us that. And we're really only doing the on-air reports when we see a trend, or if there's something that's particularly timely or egregious or just really stands out as being unique. The Tuckers, we weren't getting a ton of moving complaints, but their van arrived 5 months later. We decided to follow up on that one as an example of something that just stood out.
Sometimes, too, we look at this is something that impacts a lot of people. So a lot of people, in Sinatra's instance, rent storage units. There's a ton of them across the state, so I think we look at that in addition to that.
Yeah, and I'd come to you saying, we get a lot of complaints about storage units. Is it time I do a story about one? Because that's kind of a regular thing we hear about too.
I love sitting in the office next to Annette's, because I will hear her on the phone sometimes, and she's so good.
Patient.
She's so good. She's so incredibly patient with people who I think could really wear. And I say people, I mean, all of us in this business occasionally get someone who's just a real oddball, or they're very difficult, or they're very persistent, and she's so patient with them. But I heard her the other day dealing with a situation where she was having to explain to the business that, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I have to show the consumer what you're saying.
Right.
So sometimes there's that realization that, they want to maybe disparage someone until they find out that you're going to present what I say to them too.
Back, right.
Well, that's something we do sometimes contact the viewer or the business about their submission to us and say, are you sure you want to word it this way? Because if it's the consumer using colorful language and lots of accusations that are kind of based on personal opinion, those aren't going to help you maintaining this professional, discussion with the business.
Or a business saying the viewer's a drunk is probably not going to help,
That's
right?
a specific example. someone overheard a specific conversation. But yeah, that happens too, where we say, you understand this is what we're going to send back to them. So we do allow some grace if we get something that's a little bit colorful and we realize might cause more harm than good. We'll say, are you sure? Are you sure you want to send that?
I just think it speaks, though, to the power of, two people not either listening to each other or getting along, or maybe it is getting personal, but then you get someone with a reputation and someone with the power to go on the air and tell a story
Right.
who's in the middle saying, what are the facts? And can you come to an agreement that is reasonable here? How often that works?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Annette has a more than 20 cases a month that we typically resolve, which I think is a pretty good rate. And, every now and then we get one with a big dollar amount, but usually they're, under $2,000-$3,000. So that's I think she's doing great work, and I'm glad she's working behind the scenes on these cases.
Yeah, and I think just the resolution stories that you end up doing every month.
Oh, those are fun.
I like seeing those because, I mean, obviously it's a little self-serving, but I like hearing when they're
Yeah.
like, if it wasn't for Contact 6, I would still be here with this broken fridge, or
Right.
these 2 plane tickets I never got to go on the trip, and just the thankfulness that they feel toward Contact 6.
I meet the nicest people doing those resolution stories.
Yeah.
The last one was so great. I went to the home of this sweet woman who's like maybe in her 70s, just moved into a condo, and she wanted to keep her landline telephone of 50 years, is connected to a medical device for her husband. She was so sweet. We left with cookies, and like they're just the nicest people when you do those interviews.
I think of how often in your stories you are sitting with someone at their dining room table and they've got out paperwork
Yeah.
or notes that they have been struggling with.
Right.
And it's so relatable. I think that's one of the things about Contact 6
Yeah.
is it is so universally relatable, because I think of my grandfather when I was a child who would sit around
Yeah.
with his magnifying glass and a doctor's bill and gripe about everything on that doctor's
Yeah.
bill. And so you're sitting there, but you're feeling helpless, and there's Jenna coming in and going, we're going to help you fix this. And I think that's an extremely relatable thing. It's one of the things that we do on Fox 6 News. It's probably the most direct contact,
Yeah.
I
Right.
think, with our viewers.
Well, and I want to reiterate, some of this is like, it might seem like small potatoes, stuff that wouldn't get our attention, but we handle all cases of all sizes, so you can always send us a submission, and if it meets our criteria, we'll take it. And if it's $5, it's $5. We'll still do it.
Right.
So I appreciate you saying that.
What are some of the cases, you talked about the criteria, what are some of the cases that Contact 6 does not take?
We have quite a list, and we still do get complaints about these things. We just send them resources instead. So like child custody issues, medical malpractice, attorney malpractice, neighbor versus neighbor, business versus business, landlord versus tenant. Those are all examples.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will write us a submission and we'll realize in the context of it that they're a business. It might be a small business, but that's something we can't handle.
I know
So-
sometimes there are, for instance, a systemic issue like maybe evictions during the pandemic.
Sure.
You did cover that, but an individual
air,
landlord-tenant
though.
situation probably isn't going to be something you're going to handle as a processed case, right?
No, not as our off-air process. There's just too many of them, and there's a lot of back and forth. He said, she said. They really need, neighborhood services inspectors
Or
to
a
go into
lawyer,
those
or-
properties,
yeah, right.
or lawyers to may be most effective in those cases, because we just don't have the people to go in or the knowledge to go in and study a situation and determine what the violations are.
Let's talk really quick. Ask Contact 6.
Oh, great.
It's like the
Yeah.
future of Contact 6. No, It's just
Yeah.
like another fun, another
Yeah.
arm of this consumer unit. So
Yes, we just started doing this year, and we are recording typically 45 minutes to an hour where we focus
Right here in
on
this
Right here in
podcast
this
studio.
right here in
Yes,
this room.
right,
It's
yeah.
on Fox Local, and we pick a topic, one specific topic from the list of things we've been talking about today. Coming up, we're going to do something about medical billing, issues with the healthcare system. Other times we did do an episode on landlord-tenant issues. We've done issues on money problems that you might be having, issues with credit cards, accounts, and so on. And what we do is we bring in an expert or two in that particular field, and our viewers can send us questions directly to ask them. And then Annette comes in here, she reads the questions, and we discuss them and try to answer it for that particular viewer. And it's really fun to take their specific questions and see the range of problems that are coming before us. We did one recently on contractors, contracting issues as well. And it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed doing it. And I feel like we're adding to our knowledge base every time we do it, which is great.
One of my favorite things about this podcast is right before we came on here today, Jenna says to me, my brain's not working today. I don't know if I just don't know if I'm going to get into the right space. And then the microphone goes on and she knocks it out of the park.
Stop it.
It's crazy.
true.
I've struggled enough.
So we are going to go off the record when we come right back. It is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have done no preparation unless we refer to Sarah Smith because she has
me.
the question. So
Let me start really quick by saying last show, whatever, you guys were kind enough to gift me for Boss's Day candy corn and a jar of pickles. Not to
because
be
everyone has
together,
candy corn and pickles
because
together,
those are the
right?
things I like. So I ate a few that day. I brought it home. My two children very much destroyed much of the container.
Yeah.
So my mother-in-law was at our house on Saturday, and she saw that it had been down very far, and I was talking about how you guys gifted it to me, yada, yada. So then she happened to watch the podcast episode, the last one, and she was like, wait, you just got that day? And then on Saturday, it was almost gone. I was like, your grandchildren did this. So they loved the candy corn, so thanks.
Good.
Anyway.
Didn't
Way to
Quinn
blame
say
the
it was her
kids.
boss
Okay.
day too?
Oh, yeah, she did say. She goes, why did you get this? I said, well, it was
This is your
Boss's
daughter,
Day.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
daughter. Yeah, she's almost 12. And then she goes, oh, well, I bossed Kyle around. That's her brother. I bossed him around. So happy Bossy Day to me. And then
Candy
ate the
corn
candy
in her
corn.
mouth.
I'm actually, but there were some left, so
There
they
were
weren't gone.
There
so
were.
that's
No.
something.
I ate some. I finished it. So don't you worry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Really quick, and maybe this will spawn other conversation because I do have another question. But I saw this and I was like, ooh. Okay, toothpaste, a tube of toothpaste. When it's time to squeeze it, do you squeeze it from the middle or the end?
This is a daily frustration for me, and I just haven't bothered to go back and get one of those little things that you
like the
squeeze it up-
plastic twister guy?
Squeeze it up at the
Yeah.
end because I hate when you're fighting to get the last little bit out.
You're
when
scraping
it's new,
it on the
though,
counter, like pushing it up to the top.
when it's new, I try to kind of squeeze from the more backish end, but you're like, it's all
Yeah.
there, it's fine. But then as it starts to get less and less, then you go, I should have been a more responsible.
Gosh, and then it gets all
Tube
bent in the
pusher.
middle,
Yeah.
and
Well,
the top gets all bent.
Then you can
yeah.
just put it on the edge of the thing and just.
Oh, that's what she was just saying.
Wait,
like
what?
rub it.
Oh,
Like
on
you-
the edge of the sink?
like
Yeah,
on
on the edge of the
edge.
sink. And just whoosh.
I
Make that noise.
I like that. I do like that.
The
I'm
noise.
going to try that tonight probably because I think I had that issue. Like our tube is getting low, and I was struggling to get
Well,
that. little-
yeah, this morning
But
I
I have
definitely
another
squeezed
problem.
in
And
the
I don't know
middle.
if this is brand specific, but the brand we use, and I'll just say it's Colgate, but it with the tip, like the toothpaste sticks.
Oh, no,
matter
that's-
how many
yeah.
times I try to
No,
clean
that's
the
every-
lid
that's every
and
brand.
Close the. I don't know if it's the other people in the house aren't doing it as well or what. But
Right.
I
I
always
think
try
it
to
just-
clean the
no,
end.
I think it just happens.
I hate a cap
especially
that
with
won't
kid
close.
toothpaste,
kids.
it's just so disgusting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have an issue sometimes with delicate things like this. My husband will say that I'm a bear. Like if I open a bag of chips, he's like, "Did a bear open this bag of chips? Like what happened?" So I'm sure I'm squeezing it from the middle or the top, or just
Not really,
whatever's
yeah,
the fastest.
okay.
I'm
A real
probably not
psycho.
like a real crazy.
No,
bear.
I do that
So
too.
do
I
you
squeeze
have
it
the
in
bag
middle.
of chips? You like open a bag of chips and then it like rips even further, and then it's
Yeah,
like,
I
Wait,
have
do you
trouble-
go like this, or do you like? Are you a cutter?
I'm trying to cut them now, but if
Okay.
I pull it open, it's going to tear down the side.
right.
Like I just
Yeah.
can't. I'm a bear.
But
I-
you know,
Yeah.
you know what I did? I should have paused so we could have that as a separate soundbite.
I'm a bear.
But what I have these plastic containers, real nice sealed things that you can put chips in or whatever.
Oh,
So
I
you
do.
see- and
Nice.
I love that in terms of like organization or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the problem: it's so easy to grab one of those, flip open the lid, and grab. If I
sure.
put anything in those containers, it is gone like that. If it stays in
Because
a
the
bag,
bag
Yeah,
is
but it's
more
not
work.
any harder to just grab the chips out of the
you
bag.
don't, it does just the smallest amount of friction keeps in the way. If I have to pull the thing off,
Yes.
unwrap, do
Wait.
this sort of thing,
Oh, hold
and
on.
the crinkly sound, everyone
static.
else
Oh,
can hear
everyone
it.
knows. They know you're
I
eating
can
those
sneak a couple of
Lays.
handfuls. No one knows out of the plastic container.
Wait.
But you got to make the crinkly sound. Everyone knows Brian's having potato chips or Cheez-Its or
if
something.
you have a bag of chips, how do you fold the bag back up to clip it?
fold it?
I roll it
Just
up.
roll it up.
And then
What?
I put, we have little clips that look like
You
birds.
just
and I put a
roll
bird
it?
clip
Roll
on
it up and then
Yep.
you stick
No.
it against something else.
Yeah, I do
No.
that too.
Wait,
right.
you don't even use a clip?
You
That's
probably
the
you
best.
probably reuse the twisty tie on your bread thing.
I do.
too.
I
Nope.
save them all.
Roll it up, put it underneath,
Wait.
and then put it down.
I fold it like this, my chip bag. I fold
Okay,
it.
I might do
and
that,
then
but
I
then
fold
roll
it like
it.
this.
Wait, hold on. Do
Show
it
me.
again. There you go. Show
I'm
me.
showing you. So I fold.
So you like origami fold your chips?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
It helps seal it. You know who
Do
does
you get
this?
upset when? Yeah. Everybody else.
Sociopaths.
Me
Well, I do
and
that. We do that.
Kale, when you said about leaning it against
No.
something else.
Yes. It's the best.
Kale.
Related to that so much. No.
When I was for most of my life a Cheez-It fiend, and I've been trying not to eat as many. They're in a box, so you roll them up
That's
and then
it.
you just sort of tip the bag in the box a
Yep.
little bit and
No,
shut the
never,
box.
never,
Yes.
never.
That's-
A lot of businesses are giving out chip clips now
Yes.
with like their
Yeah.
names on it. Whenever my kids come home with like some paraphernalia from
Yes.
a business, I'm like, a chip clip.
Well,
Great.
Fox sent a bunch of stuff that was from promotional items from
Yeah.
fall shows that were coming on. And one of the things was a chip clip, and you bet your sweet Bippy, I grabbed
Yeah.
about 6 of those.
Yeah.
I hate to wrap this up because this has been good, but we got to wrap. We'll take a break. Yeah, that might be the first time we've gotten a wrap signal
Yeah.
from Kale, but if you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. Thanks to the people who make this podcast possible, our executive producer Sarah Smith, our editor Dave Machuda, our chief photographer manning the video switcher Kale Zimney, and of course Jenna Sachs. With that, I'm Brian Polson. We'll be back next week.